decade ago when I uncooked meat. I bought 3 meat thermometers and it has been drilled into me that you need to check the meat. So she came. I don't like it when you do that. I'm like. I don't like when I'm forced to do that. I like. We're all on the same page. Oh.
$5:59. Sit here with the gavel. All right, 6 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we will begin as we do with our land acknowledgement statement. The Chinookan peoples, known as the Clackamas and Cascades, are the indigenous people of the land now inhabited by the city of Wood Village and other areas of the Columbia River. The village of Nechakli was located near today's Blue Lake Park. Ancestral life of these people included a seasonal round of resource gathering and stewardship from the Wapato fields and fishing areas of the Columbia River to the cedar and huckleberry gathering areas of the High Cascades. Introduced disease from early settlers dramatically reduced the number of these people. They signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 with the United States government and were forcibly removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many indigenous Native American families today. We're honored by the collective work of many Native nations, leaders, and families who are demonstrating resilience, resistance, revitalization, healing, and creativity, and we are honored to be guests upon these lands. Now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Now we'll open the floor for citizen comment on non-agenda items. And Greg, I understand that we had 2 comments sent in.
The master volume. So we did receive, it was 1 phone comment and then 1 walk-in comment. And the nature of the phone one was unidentified resident on 230th First Court wanted to express their displeasure with the number and type of homeless and houseless individuals in the community and was concerned we're becoming like Portland. I do believe this isn't related to a vehicle parking issue on their cul-de-sac, probably from an adjacent neighborhood or development, and they just were displeased with that. But we said we'd pass that along to the council. The other one was from a gentleman, Bill Miles at 100 Cedar Lane, who lives behind 105 Maple, which if you've driven into the original village over the past 2 months, that's one of the very tall grass and that we've historically had some difficulties with in terms of maintenance, vegetation maintenance. And Mr. Miles' concern was our processes seem to take too long. And, we explained to him they're kind of both based on, case law and, reasonable notice to ensure, 1, we don't get sued for entering, private property and mitigating things. And we have reasonable course for cost recovery. His request was, he understood his process and procedures, but, asked, could we look at if there are updated case laws, updated procedures to shave time off of those types of cases and maybe try to be a little more proactive with more chronic nuisance violators, specifically vegetation.
Thank you.
Greg, I just had a question back to the vehicles on the cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
Those are not abandoned vehicles that there's been complaints made about. Those are just cars with people.
This particular section, 230th First Court, they're tight little cul-de-sacs. Some of them are from people living in those cul-de-sacs. Some are from neighbors, that's where they choose to park. We tend to mark cars there every few weeks, whether or not they're abandoned or just someone that's where they chose to park for a bit and then it, moves back to their driveway or adjacent neighborhood. We don't necessarily know because the car is moved and we don't know where it always moves to, but sometimes it is just neighbor to neighbor,
Because I know we've been pretty responsive if we get a complaint about an abandoned vehicle.
Yes.
Because I was, personally involved with that with one of my neighbors, so.
Yeah, and that's our two, especially this time of year, is perceived abandoned vehicles and vegetation, with that springtime, summertime. That's our busy season for specifically those two things. And we have Riverwood and South Riverwood has been an ongoing concern just because of the tighter streets and the clusters of driveways. There are very few, I'll call it just general open parking spots, and some community members there have a number of vehicles, whether they're personal, business, whatnot. And, people want cars to move a little more frequently.
All right, thank you, Greg. We'll close the floor for citizen comment on non-agenda items. And we'll bring up Sergeant Gerkman for the public safety report. And everybody has a copy of the report on there.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for having me. Looks like over the last 30-day period, overall dispatch calls went down quite a bit in the city, as well as a bit closer, as well as self-initiated activities went up quite a bit. So that's a good sign. Non-emergency calls went down quite a bit they went down to 88 and we average about 130. And I think I glossed over it. Dispatch calls were down to 124 versus 167, which is the average. So calls for service are going down and self-initiated activity is going up. Probably the warm weather. We seem to get a little more active in the warm weather. More people are moving around, more stops are made as we get into the nicer months. But as far as the overall types of call volumes, outside of traffic stops being substantially higher, which is 136, and the average is just below 80, everything seemed to be pretty close to on par or just a little bit lower. But traffic stops definitely have increased substantially, which is nice to see. Looks like there was 10 traffic crashes in the city of Wood Village over that 30-day period. None of them were fatal. None of them had serious physical injuries. And only one vehicle was reported stolen in the city of Wood Village, which is down from the average of almost 5, about 4.5. So again, that's really good to see. Hopefully maybe it's the more proactive policing that's been going on over the last month, maybe help diminish that a little bit. I wanted to talk about, there was also a crosswalk mission done on Wood Village Boulevard at Riverwood. It lasted for about an hour with 4 police vehicles doing stops while one plainclothes officer crossed back and forth on the crosswalk. Approximately 20 traffic stops were made. 3 citations were written, 17 crosswalk warnings were issued, and 5 warnings of other traffic violations were issued in that hour. So it was a pretty productive hour.
Sergeant Gerkman, would you run through those numbers again? I've heard them a couple of times, but I got to write them down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I got another meeting to go to here in a few weeks to talk about this.
It was about an hour long. There were 4 police cars. 20 stops were made. 3 citations written. 17 warnings for crosswalk violations, as well as 5 warnings of other types of traffic violations.
And that was about was that a 2-hour period or?
No, it was about an hour.
An hour period, okay. Yeah, hour long, you said.
It was a
Okay,
pretty
thanks.
active hour.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah, active.
Get the National Guard out there to help you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Looking through the calls for service log, there was a couple that jumped out at me that I'd like to run some information by you. There was a robbery with a weapon at the Rock Pizza. This was back on May 20th. It shows that we took somebody into custody, but unfortunately it was not the robber. Somebody matching the description ran from us on the I believe on the other side of Fred Myers from the rock. So we keyed in on that and we ended up taking that person into custody, was not the robber. However, a serial robber was arrested by Portland who had robbed the pizzeria in Troutdale. And I think they're still trying to link things up, but that is very likely our suspect. There was also a call that might jump out to you, priority 1 threat with a weapon. That turned out to be not how it at first read. It was husband owned a gun, and that's how it kind of blew up into a threat with a weapon. It was more a misunderstanding on dispatch's end versus an actual someone getting threatened with a gun. It was just a argument where there was a gun in the house, and that's how the information was kind of misrelayed to us, which happens from time to time. Also, the last call, which didn't happen last month, but it happened today. I know Mr. Dirks was briefed on this. We had kind of a tactical incident on 237th. Subject was going through a mental health crisis and was out in the street for a while, waving around a samurai sword, breaking out windows, things of that nature. We responded to that at about 10:30 this morning. We had our crisis negotiators come out as well as Project Respond. And it took about 4 hours, but we were able to take the subject into custody safely with very minimal force being used. It's a real good turnout.
Good.
Yeah. That's all I have for you. If you have any questions for me.
Council President Nissen, any questions?
Sergeant, I know you mentioned the number of traffic stops were up almost double what they have been. Any ideas? Is it just the nicer weather and more traffic movement now that we're kind of out of the whole COVID thing? We've
Yeah.
got some more personal contact
Right.
that the deputies are not veering away from so much, or?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. The warm weather definitely helps, gets people moving, gets us moving. We've done some concentrated traffic missions as well as stolen vehicle missions and gun missions lately. We've been during the sheriff's public safety initiative that we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of specific missions in East County targeting a lot of traffic stops. That's probably part of the increase.
Okay, great.
I
Thank
would
you.
imagine though, throughout the summer, we'll see those numbers stay hopefully higher.
Excellent.
Councilor Minor, any questions?
You know, again, just to commend the traffic stops and the self-initiated, because I've listened to the sheriff and talking, and across the county, I'll just commend you and the sheriff's office for really starting to seek out enforcement and enforcing our existing rules of the road.
Right.
And I think it's going to make a big difference in some of the street racing and the rest of the issues that, you know, it's hard to get our arms around.
Yeah, thank you. And I would agree. You could see a correlation, more self-initiated activity, less calls, less thefts being reported, stolen vehicles went down substantially. So I'm sure it all correlates.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Rios Campos?
Yeah, this is kind of like a two-part question. So how are you guys with recruitment and retaining as you guys lead into the summer? And, you know, looking at all this activity you guys have been able to initiate and stop. We know summer is, you know, those months that other activity tend to increase as well. So how's that going for you all?
So hiring is tough. We are understaffed. I think every profession is understaffed right now, but we're significantly understaffed. We do have several laterals from other agencies that are in our hiring process. Several of them, or at least a handful of them from the Gresham Police Department. But hiring is tough right now. We're very understaffed. It was one day, I want to say last week, it was a Friday where we had 16 overtime shifts just in that one day. So thankfully people are still making the stops, and I think the warm weather gives people a little bit more energy, but there's a lot of hours being worked. I think retention, I don't think we have a retention issue. The employees, we seem to be very happy. I'm very happy at the sheriff's office. I think most people, just a matter of getting the right people to apply for the job. And that's the struggle right now.
And then I know Gresham, earlier this year got a $2 million grant for violence prevention. Are you guys in collaboration with them in those efforts, or is that kind of a little separate?
Well, I don't know specifically where that grant is going, what that's paying for, but a lot of our gun and stolen car missions, we've been pairing up with Gresham, actually on all of them. So maybe that's funding some of these missions that are going on. I would have to look into that more. But we are partnering with Gresham substantially.
Thank you.
Counselor Armand? Have any questions at all for Sergeant Kirk? Sergeant Kirk?
Great.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is a review of bills paid. Does anybody have any questions or comments at all about either what's on the agenda or what was in the staff report? All right, then we'll move on to the consent calendar. Before I entertain a motion on the consent calendar, I would like to mention that staff from the MHCRC is on the call, and they might want to make some comments about the budget document and also the year in review document that are in the staff packet. Rebecca, I'd like to give you some time if you had any points that you'd like to make or presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Harden. I don't have anything specific. If it moves forward on the consent, that's fine. I'm just here in case anybody had questions.
Rebecca, we can't hear you if you are trying to speak.
Oh, sorry. Is this any better?
Lighten up. Is tech issue maybe? Because she's not muted.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Now she is muted.
I'm wondering if we can check for connection. Jeff, would you mind saying just a few words just so we can see if whose issue the audio is on?
Hello?
Sorry. Testing. Can you hear me?
To be our issue.
Yep, can't hear Jeff either.
Yeah. I can hear Rebecca.
Yeah, we can't hear you either, Jeff. Hang tight, Rebecca. We're going to try and figure out how to fix it so we can hear you. Sorry about that.
Try now.
Yeah, we can hear Jeff now.
There we go.
So Rebecca, you want to try again?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Harden. I didn't have anything specific. I'm just here to answer any questions in case it got pulled from consent.
Thank you very much. I would then approve a motion on the consent calendar, or entertain a motion on the consent calendar. I guess can't approve it until we vote.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so consent agenda is approved and the MHCRC budget is approved as a result. Thanks very much, Rebecca. We appreciate it. All right, next up then is a discussion on tiny homes with Greg.
Just in the spirit of what we promised, I'm blaming M for the audio issue. She wasn't here to set things up, so.
Hey, it works. Find somebody.
All right, thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council. We are here to loop back on the tiny homes, do a bit of a brief recap on what has been done to date and discuss whatever next steps you will want to take with this initiative. So for the background, this was part of the current year's annual performance plan, and the reason behind it was several-fold. One, there's a lot of interest in allowing people who want to call Wood Village home to allow them to call it home, and with increasing housing prices, housing shortages, rent increases, there's a lot of different ways to try to allow people to call Wood Village home. We also saw during the wildfires about a year and a half ago, a number of people came here seeking refuge in RVs, trailers, and things. Most were able to go back home after a week or two. Some lost their home and stayed here for a bit longer. And it kind of also spurred the thought, gee, you know, we don't allow them to stay in trailers. Why they either rebuild or find a new home or would want to call Wood Village home. And maybe there's a way, you know, we could have allowed that a bit longer term. And lastly, it's really hard to go to a conference, convention, training, read the news without hearing about, you know, tiny homes, whether, you know, the interest in it, people trying to live in it and not being allowed to, and just an unregulated market of tiny homes and the ability that what that could provide for housing and more affordable housing. So we proposed a Portland State graduate student capstone project through the School of the Masters of Urban Regional Planning, and we were awarded that grant. And some of the members from that team are actually here this evening. In a little bit, they'll talk about their experience and, you know, their perceptions of the work. So the team working with staff developed you know, iterations of concepts until we thought it ripe to present to, you know, the Planning Commission and Council as a joint before, is this good enough to take public? And that concept was defining and classifying tiny homes on wheels or RVs as habitable spaces, not dwelling units. Dwelling units fall within a very specific framework within the Uniform Building Code. And these wouldn't be able to meet that kind of as envisioned, you know, looking at reduced cost of opportunity. The thought was, you know, one tiny home or RV per property in the LR 7.5 and 12 zones, not on a vacant lot. And those zones were selected because they are the less dense of our residential zones. When you're getting to our MR zones, there's already opportunities for increased density. Maybe not necessarily affordability per se, but that increased density compared to the single family residential zones. They'd be required to have utility connections, water, sewer, and electricity. That's what the graphic on the bottom right shows. They were designed as RV style hookups because, again, they were going to be habitable spaces, not dwelling units, plumbed in, you know, the manner that a dwelling unit would be, like such as an ADU. And the setbacks would be all the same as any other structure on a residential lot. So that was the concept. And on March 24th, that was presented to you and the Planning Commission in joint session, where a lot of things were discussed and shared, and ultimately said, yes, go ahead and do some public engagement and outreach on this. So the city mailed a postcard to all the homeowners and property owners in the LR 7.5 and 12 zones, indicating the open house event. We also combined that same postcard, though, with the House Bill 2001 initiatives and efforts. And you know, hindsight's always 20/20, but, you know, in the thought behind that was House Bill 2001 was looking at expanding housing choices. And the state's intent of having some robust public engagement on that was, does your community want to expand that? Mostly, you know, 5-plex, 6-plex, 8-plex kind of expansions. And it was thought, well, you know, from early on in House Bill 2001, that's not a direction the city wants to go in terms of that aspect of 2001, but maybe there's something smaller that could be done that could still help people and affordability in housing. So it, at the time, made sense to link tiny homes and House Bill 2001 as increased housing opportunities. We did hear a lot of feedback, how some thought that was confusing or purposefully confounding in that trying to pass it through as actually mandated. While the intent was we're talking about housing and housing options, and the thought was including tiny homes in that discussion. An outside party did send a 2-page flyer that outlined, say, worst case scenarios or things outside the concept, but were concerning. We don't know who sent that, but it certainly brought a lot of people to the open house. So we had about 45 people at the open house. That was April 25th. And the next slide has some of the feedback, and we did review that feedback the following day at the April 26th meeting. And then our May newsletter article included additional information about the concept, and we did that both in English and Spanish. And then it also had a paper form and a link to an online form for additional public engagement about the concept. We did that both for tiny homes and House Bill 2001. So the feedback, due to that flyer, it did have a QR code built into it that once scanned, generated kind of a template email, and that people could either send that as is, some did additions to it. So we received about 30 of those prior to the open house. At the open house itself had 28 written comments and, countless conversations, both with, electives that were there, staff members, the capstone team. And we kind of, as best we could, debrief the essence of that meeting the following evening at the council meeting. From those two events, we had about 10 additional written comments that came in. Some were letters and some were through the city's online form that we created. All the public comment that we received is in your packet. And we also did post that on the website. So people that were interested in following the tiny home concept, they could see all the comments that have come in about this idea. So in a brief summary, it hasn't changed much since we discussed about a month ago. Call it not supportive of the concept, whether that was they just sent the template email or some of the comments at the open house. A lot of the concerns were about the long-term safety and compliance. As we said, these were habitable spaces with, as I call them, RV style hookups. People commented, great, you inspect it, you know, the day they have the utilities through the building permit process, but the unit itself, connections from the unit to the standpipe, you know, that seems a little squishy for some folks. And then the long-term care and maintenance of whether it's an RV or tiny home. So those were some concerns about some people. I labeled it neighborhood livability, whether it was perceived issues with, you know, perhaps parking or crime, drugs, you know, et cetera, and then property values. And, you know, you all as a council kind of said, you know, it'd be great to get more information about what real world impacts have been from these styles of enhancements or enhanced zoning codes to allow these. And as the report, you know, kind of indicates, not a lot of cities outright enable it. And even the ones that do don't have a lot of permitted units. So there's just not the data to say, yes, you know, this city and this city and this city have done it for X number of years and have this many hundreds of units. And this has been the general, that doesn't exist. There may be tiny homes out and about all over the country. They're most likely unregulated. Therefore, the data is just, you can't get that because the jurisdiction, whether it's unincorporated county or a city, they're not collecting it. But there were some, you know, comments, whether it's at the open house or written, neutral, open to continue to explore it. I believe there is one that was in favor of it. So that's just a general, some of the comments. And again, you have all of them were in your packet. Kind of as part of the course requirements of the capstone. So as a city, we required them to put together the concept, some draft code elements that we crafted the concept with, and help with the community outreach and engagement portions, develop the graphics and all those great things. They also had to write a report for the class. And, you know, what they really did is look at this as a case study example of, you know, an adoption, both the concept itself and, you know, the adoption process that other practitioners, agencies, jurisdictions could use if they're looking at, you know, exploring tiny homes in their community. That report is in front of you this evening, and it will be posted also on the website tomorrow, where we'll update it based on whatever next steps and directions you direct. We'll include that as well as the report. And some of the team members are here this evening that want to kind of share their experience briefly. And so I'll turn the floor to them about 5-7 minutes.
Before you start, did everybody graduate? Okay.
Yeah, they're here on their own accord. They actually graduated like a week ago, so they didn't have to come back.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, and wonderful city staff for providing this opportunity to dig really deeply into mobile dwellings as a part of the response and solution to the growing housing crisis. And thank you to the rest of this outstanding project team, Andrew Oliver, Matthew Hall, Grace Coffey, and Sam Huck. We have learned a lot and really appreciate everything the city, its representatives, and the residents do to make this a wonderful and unique place. The core of all of this, the reason for this project, is that there's not adequate housing supply. We continue to underproduce housing because of development costs, limited space, and restrictive policy. Because we are undersupplied, rent prices continue to rise while vacancy remains low. In Wood Village, the current multifamily vacancy rate but one of many indicators for housing security, is under 5%. A healthy vacancy rate should be closer to 9%. So individuals and families can move when they choose and have options of where to move. Currently, these extremely low vacancy rates mean someone's options are extremely limited for moving, for a growing family, to be closer to a job, or for any number of reasons why someone may want or need to move. This is a big problem. Increases in all types of housing production is necessary. First and foremost, affordable housing, but also middle and high-end housing production so that wealthier individuals and families with the means can occupy those more expensive houses and free up the middle and more affordable housing options for those with greater financial needs. And so we have this conversation about mobile dwellings, not really our perfect long-term housing solution, but indeed an invaluable opportunity for providing housing options that are far preferable to doubling up or to overpaying prices that folks can't afford, or to having to instead resort to living on the street. This is the part of the conversation I wish I would have emphasized more the last time we were up here speaking with you. There's so many people, family, friends, neighbors that are struggling, that need help, that need more housing options. People that can't or can just barely make ends meet and are at risk of losing housing or not able to save any money because they're spending a disproportionate amount of a limited income that's not rising fast enough to keep pace with our steadily rising housing costs. Mobile dwellings are an opportunity to prevent people from winding up on the street. Can they serve other people too? Of course. As we mentioned before, kids returning from college, great. Grandparents that want to stay close to family, that's just the best for everyone. An opportunity for property owners to earn some additional rental income? Absolutely. But we can't emphasize enough the importance of adding this option with an approved code to change to code so that regular people who are more and more being squeezed by inflation and increasing rent costs can have another option. And we know it's already happening informally out of necessity. If this provides just one more person a safe mobile dwelling to live in here in Wood Village, I think it will have been worth it. And realistically, that's probably all that would happen. If a city like San Luis Obispo, California, the city with the most permits provided for mobile dwellings, had a whopping total of 4 since adoption in 2020, then Wood Village won't likely expect anything that different in the near future, but should absolutely monitor their benefits and consequences. In every jurisdiction we researched that allowed for mobile dwellings, there was not a single public complaint on file since changing the code, not one. I know there's been some fear stirred up that this is inviting derelict RVs to be parked in the street and on yards. But as city councilors and informed residents, you should know that this is absolutely not what is being proposed. The RV and tent camping is indeed a symptom of our housing crisis and increasing unaffordable rents, but in no way is it connected with permitting mobile dwellings. If anything, this should help ease, if even just a little bit, the need to resort to camping on the street. It provides property owners the option, the opportunity, and the freedom to choose to rent an approved pad on their own privately owned property for mobile dwelling use. In no way does it require them to do anything they don't want. We have spent a lot of time researching, interviewing, and distilling all things mobile dwelling into this report, complete with adaptable code. It's designed to be clear and concise so that policymakers, decision makers, and city councilors can look at the available evidence and make an informed decision about how they want to treat mobile dwellings. We hope you'll look through this report. We printed extra copies for anyone interested. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your work and compassion and insight. And thank you for this really wonderful opportunity to carry out this project and share it with you. We'll look forward to the next time we can be here as full-time planners and not subject to the Portland State University academic calendar. Thanks again, and we'll help spread the word of where the heck Wood Village is.
Yeah, they did get t-shirts.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so again, that report will be on our website. So, other jurisdictions can, if they're interested, pick that up and take the process as they will. For
Greg,
us,
talking
yes.
about other jurisdictions in your meetings with city managers, have they been asking you about this or have you handed out one of these yet to them?
No, we just got that.
Oh, you just got it.
Week, I
Yeah.
think.
Have you had conversations or have they been checking back with you on it?
No, actually haven't been, but now with the report out, it'd be easier to like, hey, just here's a thought, because maybe not us right now. That doesn't mean other cities, other jurisdictions can't
Sure.
use the work that was done here and build upon it.
Well, I would guess that they would be interested because the work that our group has been doing has been probably more in depth than most places have their hands on at this point.
So several next steps, these are all listed in your packet. So I'm not going to just walk through each bullet point, but rather point out it's done kind of in a spectrum where at the top is called the road towards adoption consideration. The middle are more incremental steps or actions initiatives to help address maybe some of the concerns that were raised through this process. And then the last bullet point is more of a path of called less action towards actual adoption. So, explaining some of the middle ones, and a concept is, we heard a lot of concerns about it's not a permitted dwelling unit, it's a habitable space. Perhaps we work with the legislature in crafting some components, whether it be similar to House Bill 2001, where it's a very comprehensive land use package, or maybe it's with BCD and actually some sort of standard and inspection program for units and the means and methods for those utility connections. So these were in your packet, and this is kind of the spectrum of directions and possibilities for you to direct staff of where you want us to go with this. And so that's the end of this presentation. So we're looking for questions, your discussion. I'm going to leave it on this slide so you have it in front of you if one of those resonated more or not.
Council President Nissen.
First question that comes to mind, where is the break between a habitable space and a dwelling unit?
Inspection. Well, so I would say inspection and inspection code, like building code standards and inspections.
Okay.
So a habitable space, and we worked with our building official on this because Gresham some years ago actually took some steps similar to this, but never went to adoption with it. And so a habitable space is it heated? Does it have, cooking facility and kind of sleeping facility? But it's not necessarily permitted space. So for example, you could have a 200 square foot ADU that's going to have a full foundation, fully plumbed, electric, kitchen, bathroom, fully inspected, versus a 200 square foot tiny home on wheels could be essentially anything on wheels, connected or not connected to utilities.
Right. And I imagine this would have to be part of code, but then it would also require city attention. Is if it's not a dwelling unit, it's a habitable space, there's going to be a limited term that said unit is on the pad.
Not necessarily.
So in my mind, then we start to break over between a dwelling unit to a habitable space, that I could build a tiny home on wheels, that there's no standard. Yours truly's pounding nails, which could be scary to everyone, and live in it, but there's no life safety standard there. And now it's gone from a temporary to a permanent thing. And we still don't have the life safety there. And we've transitioned, that line's getting really blurred.
And that is concerns, we certainly heard at the open house specifically, because you get a trailer frame, anyone could build, a thing and wire it somehow. There are some limited inspection programs for like ANSI standards. They've been mostly used for like food carts, for example, inspecting those. They're timely, costly, and not readily available. And I'm not even sure how that may be adaptable to more of a habitable space versus like a commercial food cart, for example.
So with those thoughts, I would lean more towards either continuing to monitor other cities kind of at first shot, or and then bring it back to council at a later date. Or kind of secondarily working with legislators to get more of a building, inspection and building code for tiny homes. If people are going to be living in them, we've got to provide for their safety. We can't just have Nissan pounding nails and put four, absolutely, that would scare everybody. Put four walls on a trailer and call it a dwelling or a habitable space.
And that was.
Something happens because of my great wiring. And now I've caused an issue.
And that was some interesting interplay between, we'll call it an RV, for example, which actually from a manufacturer is inspected, call it DOT standards. There's a level, at least when built, when new, has to conform to a level. Again, whether it's an RV, a home, people will do things inside of walls that others may not know about. You can go to a tiny home manufacturer, they don't have to be built to any standard. There's no inspection program. So even if, you're going to a reputable builder, which there are several, there's not like that stamp or that sticker, even like on a manufactured home, it's a HUD standard. No one wants to own tiny homes for whatever reason. It's lost and it's like a foul ball lost in some weeds and no one wants to find it. But that's where it could be stepped in on a legislative level to try to fill in those gaps.
I would like to see that happen.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, thank you, everyone. I was just going to very quickly mention two things. Firstly, when we spoke to Bend, they were working on a similar program with a time limit, to your time limit point. And secondarily, there are some places that actually do require third-party inspections of tiny homes if they're not RVs that have been inspected when they're manufactured. I think San Luis Obispo was one. So there is a bit of a precedent for individual jurisdictions requiring that kind of inspection as well, just to put it in your head for the future. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Planner?
Well, this topic is obviously important to us, or we wouldn't have engaged in this study. I do look at this from several vantage points. Of course, I'm an RVer, so I've made last 20 years at least living part-time in my RVs and traveling. But I look at this as, and going back to the issue here of homelessness. And we're looking to, and rightfully so here in this city, trying to address homeless and how we can do it. As I consider that, and I think about the, I don't believe we've had anybody, or you've had some inquiry about this. Or have you?
A couple of people call it, they were interested in what was the next step. And one property owner said, and it was a written comment, it was basically, I chose to live without an HOA so I could do what I want with my property. And this may be something I may be interested in. That was about the most supportive we heard.
Well, we need to solve and do our part for homelessness. I don't think this is the answer for Wood Village. Not at this time. Councillor Nissen raised the issue that I think is could be a nightmare to enforce, could be a nightmare for neighbors. And there may be jurisdictions as they work through this, we'll confront that, and we could, rely on that. But I don't think that's the answer for us here in Wood Village at this point. And I'm going to come back to the homeless. But if we want to address homelessness in a major way, we've started work on the co-ops. And we started work with the state and the invest in pursuing help for our mobile home park residents. And you want to talk about a homeless problem, let Wood Village Green get controlled by a commercial interest, and we'll have a homeless problem. I believe we need to concentrate our efforts in this city right now on that aspect to address livable homes for our residents. Now, notwithstanding the open house and the stack of comments we've had, if anybody thinks this city is ready for us to go and experiment with tiny homes and RVs, man, I'll tell you, I don't want to be close to them because our city is not ready to do this. I'm not opposed to the concept, but I'm not supportive of it at this point in time. There are a couple of bullets here that I want to draw that I've looked at. And I don't think this is necessarily done forever. But I think it needs to be done now here, and that we don't take any further action, direct action. If we want to in the future, we can bring it back when we feel like we're ready to do that. But I do think a couple of things. I don't want to direct staff to monitor what the state's doing, but I want us to monitor that. I don't want you adding something else to the APP and we start expecting reports back. If somebody comes in and says, man, I got to have a tiny home and I got all these reasons, then maybe we look at that as a pilot, like you mentioned in bullet 3, and we look at it. But on an as need basis, I think we continue to monitor other cities and we look what is happening around, because this is not going to go away. We will, this solution will be around. And as I look at the most successful that I've been watching, homeless solutions, it's not this. The most successful homeless solutions, and I just listened to a report from homeless, they compared Houston, Texas to Portland, Oregon. And Houston, Texas, and comparing, Houston's bigger than Portland, but their homelessness problem. In Houston, they've made some great inroads. They've focused on shelter, not RVs, not tiny homes. And the mayor of Houston was continually talking about they have been successful because there are wraparound services that help those individuals. We know that's true here in Portland too. When the homeless can be in a place that's safe, secure, and they have the wraparound services, then that's a real solution. I don't think this tiny homes or RVs is going to supply that. So there are some pieces missing from this solution for Wood Village in my mind right now. And again, the last thing I would say is that we have a lot on the APP. You're going to give a report on it here in just a minute. And we already have some things on there that are slowed, or we're going to talk about what the new priority is going to be. I don't want to create a priority for staff on tiny homes and RVs right now. I think we can do some of these transitional things. I mean, I'm educating myself as we move forward, and with the help of the small wins, you've made me a little bit smarter. May not sound like it, but I think we all can learn more about this. And again, I think the last thing I want to say is we have to respect what we've heard on this in the last month. We cannot ignore that. There may be reasons that we don't agree with. There may be reasons that we can offer enlightenment. But I want to tell you, we got to listen to that and be respectful of the 50-some people, maybe 70, but enough people that we need to listen to that. Because if we come back and want to go about this again, we better have the credibility and the trust that we can, that we're here and we're ready to listen and respond and take into the considerations of our residents. So those are my comments.
I could offer just a quick couple follow-ups
Sure.
really quick.
Yep.
One, I wouldn't necessarily frame it as trying to solve homeless, but rather housing security, housing affordability. And in that spirit, the co-op model, I'm actually got seated on a legislative board and panel with housing advocates and lawyers that have been working on more securities and protections for manufactured home parks and funding opportunities for the co-op model. I got involved because through Rep. Hudson, they knew about our co-op model and the work we collectively try to do to support and secure our manufactured home parks. I said, hey, you'd be a great voice in trying to push some new legislation through. So just so you're all aware, I mean, that is occurring and I am just a little part of that. And in terms of, again, housing security, housing affordability, that could be a win. The other piece, and it just left my head, but, around, as you said, about, some community members that are, really, really want this. There are some that, seemed interested. It also didn't seem like any of them were ready to go tomorrow if it were adopted. And it's a little harder to start framing the code or doing pilot cases or having those, I'll call it community conversations, where you have the folks with strong feelings on one side and strong on the other. You bring them together and you craft the code that way. It's really hard when we're missing one side of that. And again, not saying there may be people that wouldn't want that at some point. It just doesn't seem like it's right now that we heard through this process.
Councilor Rios Campos?
My initial thought when reading this was to do bullet point number 3. I think that for me spoke to everything kind of we've been like hearing and just being around, the concerns about those community members. But like you kind of mentioned, there isn't this big demand for it. And so, with that, not being such at the forefront, do we need to put that time and effort right now? And now Councilor Newsom brings up, something that I wasn't even thinking about, but like that safety feature to it, I think is crucial. Because again, I mean, what gives it, we just build a shed and say that's what it is. But it's really not that. So I think for me at this point, bullet point number 3 is kind of where I would start leaning towards. And I think with this information, this packet that you all put together, it really informs somebody quite well, and just kind of lays out all those things. And so just, waiting upon, I guess, the demand. Someone saying, this is something I'm interested, I want to do this. How can we figure this out? Because the way I see it, portability, yes, but this is more probably geared towards an individual, not so much a family, especially not a growing family. I don't think you could, looking at the max on here, 430 square feet. I mean, I'm
Cozy family.
It's very, very so yeah, that's kind of my take on this is, I don't see a huge.
And that's something, again, we'll update the webpage however the council directs, as well as the newsletter in the July newsletter. Part of it could be, if as is seeming, maybe it's the right solution, it's just maybe not right now, but leave the door open for those that may have been thinking about it, dwelling on it, or you get new people in. I mean, times change, views and interests change, regulations change. Leave the door open, say, if you are interested, or, if you have an interest, always leave the door open. They can contact us and always bring it back to the council, whomever the council may be. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's in 5 years. But leaving the door open. So if we get a balanced approach, we can maybe even look at what could a pilot be like. And maybe there are some standards, or, okay, yeah, we'll pilot it, but you have to find that third-party inspection service. And that's going to take some time and effort.
Because I do think that the newsletter that went out opposed of this was a shocker. And so I think we are kind of, you're dealing with the ripple effects of that. And so in some point in time, I also feel, like, Counselor Minor said, we kind of have to let the water stabilize a little bit. I really think we do. And then really like invite those folks that probably weren't comfortable attending that meeting and say, you know what, we'll attend if there's another meeting and, we're for it and there is a bigger demand. A fear factor does, prevent folks from really saying what they want to say sometimes. And so I think at this appropriate, I think it might be more appropriate for us to look at it that way.
Like me interject, I might like to see that if we do have somebody that comes in with some interest, maybe then start looking at a pilot project and taking in that information. We have no one. San Luis Obispo enacted theirs in 2020, and you may have been in the height of the middle of a pandemic, and everything's been, technical term, wonky since, and nothing has recovered from the pandemic and all the ripple effects of it to now the increasing cost of building materials and you name it. Nothing is normal. So I have a hard time judging based on that.
I have comments and questions as well. Thank you for this report. Is that? I haven't read it all the way through, obviously, but I do think the thing that sticks out for me the most is bullet point number 4, and I could be misinterpreting the wording, but my concern about the codes, especially for RVs, I know that some of them aren't rated for everyday use. They're rated differently depending on the size, and how that might leave some of our most vulnerable populations that might access housing, like housing like this, how that could open them to more marginalization or being taken advantage of in some ways. Like my hope for our community is that we could invest in affordable housing that's connected and stable and available for families. I'm not saying that this isn't an option, but I'm also wondering about how, as a community, we would support property owners who are, open to having tiny homes on their, how can we work together as a community to make sure that everyone's getting their needs met? And I'm not sure that this is it for us right now, but I'm also have a lot of questions about communities who have adopted tiny homes and have codes set up for that. How is it impacted? Like on page 5, there's a statement about affordable housing and systemic racism. How is race affected? How are those populations affected, and how has that community changed since they've adopted? I'd really be interested in any resource I might have about that. I have a few more scattered thoughts, but for now, I'll just leave it at that. Like, I am very interested in our community, making sure we can stay affordable for people who live here and people who are moving here as well. Thank you.
And on the theme of housing, yes, and it needs to be safe, quality housing.
Exactly.
Counselor, I've been, very public about supporting the concept. And so my knee-jerk reaction was, direct that the concept be developed in a code for adoption consideration. But I think we're a ways away from being able to direct, if we were to allow motorhomes, for instance, do we want to, we've talked about they could be at the side of the house or behind the house, but really haven't established effective screening if they're beside the house. We might even be able to come to a compromise that I think most of the fear is around motorhomes. It just takes motorhomes out of the equation and makes it tiny home only. And then to prevent the home build, you look at requiring it that it be a commercially built tiny home, professional job. And so I think that we've got a really strong start, but clearly some more things to consider before we could draft a code I think the pilot project, only works if somebody does come to us and ask. Because I mean, it's just like San Luis Obispo only has 4. We've had ADUs enabled for well over a decade and we only have 3. And so it's not as if people are just jumping at building another home on their property now. Some of them might reconsider if it were less expensive because they could do tiny home on wheels as built 80. On the working with legislators and other state officials, I think that's where the first part of the success of this program lies, is that we do have an inspection program for the commercially built tiny homes on wheels. Something that we could lobby for, and it doesn't necessarily have to be staff. It could be any one of us. And then in terms of the code enforcement, Councilor Minor brought up a really important point, that it's about community trust. And right now, one of the reasons they don't trust us is because they don't think we act quickly enough or forcefully enough on code enforcement. We had somebody talk about the tall grass, in public comment today. And so I think that, we're going to be talking about in the ADP and in the future about adding a position, and council's been of a mind that that position should include code enforcement. And so I think that we should be, more proactive and not necessarily harder on people, but, maybe just let's talk about time limits. I mean, we need to build their trust of us. We ought to be able to require of them to build our trust of them, by putting some time limits on when people will comply with codes. So I think that I don't think we need to necessarily put a ton of effort into following the other cities, because if something horribly goes horribly wrong, it's probably going to be in the news. One catches fire, burns down another house. The things that we're worried about, if they were to happen, we'll hear about them.
I don't know that we would hear about that. There are multiple
house fires reported
across our city every day that we don't even hear about, let alone out of San Luis Obispo and all of the other fires in between. I don't know that we would. I
only say it because it's a unique housing type.
We'll just have M contact us. She's down in that area.
Yeah, she's. And then, and the last bullet point, I'm fine with not taking action necessarily at this time, but I'm not ready to close the book on it.
Yeah, and that seems to be, I think, the common theme is there's still a lot of interest because of the potential benefits. There's also a lot of concerns that aren't answers to at this time. And so it could be very much, yes, the door is closed, but the door is not locked. It's communicating, like you said, establish the better trust with the people, invite them to continue to think about it as maybe there's some momentum or other interest, explore, a pilot program, as well as at a state level, some monochrome of safety to the units. And like, as it said, had there been a group of interested folks with the concerned folks, you bring them together, that's what you can craft. Okay, maybe not RVs, or maybe not RVs past this age, or maybe there is some enhanced screening versus like an ADU that doesn't have those requirements. Without the other side, it's harder to have those conversations.
I don't believe for a minute it'll change their minds, but I would invite some of the people whose only complaint was that they were going to see motorhomes in their streets to kind of read this report and go back to earlier staff reports and understand that parked in the street is not currently enabled, was never a plan to enable it. And so, half of the comments that we got are opposing something that was never going to happen anyway.
But I do agree. I think the code enforcement piece was big on their hand. And I think if the APP is going to help staff address those, I think that's how the trust starts. Because with these concerns that they currently have, if we're addressing those small fires quickly, you know, it doesn't become a big flame.
And
A
in the
huge
last
benefit.
presentation, staff has cooked up some ingredients that might address that if we get lucky enough to craft some things. Counselor, did you have a?
Yeah, and this may be covered in this as, but are there incentives for property owners of, even if it's not a tiny home necessarily, but like an ADU beyond just being a landlord? And is there also protections like rent caps, for example, like
Certainly not in Wood Village. I don't know if you came across.
Nothing. Areas.
Sorry, you said gentrified neighborhoods and this. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So if I'm understanding, the direction is close the door, not lock the door, do the feedback loops, you know, we'll do the newsletter, the website, and just again, always advocating for home housing, you know, security and affordability, however that may look. Is that?
Well, I think when you report back out to the public that you could offer up the potential to, if you were interested in doing it, of being the person that initiates. the pilot
Oh, yeah,
program.
absolutely. It was
You know,
again, you know, doors, it's not a locked door, and always, times change every day. You know, new people come in, attitudes, perceptions change.
I just think it should be a specific offer.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can do that.
And then, you know, and then I didn't bring it up before, but it occurs to me that the only thing that we run into with the pilot project without a code adopted, that, you know, we would, how do we govern the pilot?
I'd work with Jeff on that at some point.
But
if
wouldn't we
got
just
there.
use city? Wouldn't we just develop our own in a pilot?
Yeah, I mean, it'd probably under the zoning code's temporary use permit framework is probably how we would actually be able to get to that.
Yeah.
We'd probably have to dabble in some changes around the margins of that code section, but I think you could use that to, you know, set up, okay, you can have it for a year. At a year's time, we're gonna, you know, have to come back, reevaluate, see the impacts, and could always be extended, but at that year increment or whatever increment has to come back, has to be reevaluated, you know, talk with neighbors, talk with whoever's been living in there, the property owner, and just, it hasn't been the right fit. And then you could actually use that as the model for potential future code.
You know, I just say this, and I appreciate the work that the small wins, as well as graduating. You gave us some really probably a higher level of understanding of this than most jurisdictions have at this point. So I appreciate that, and Greg, your work on this too. I mean, they did a nice job responding to the numerous, you know, notes you got and statements, and I think you did a nice job responding, and I think the residents appreciated that.
Can't have a goal of an intentional community outreach and engagement if you don't practice it when you get opportunities. Maybe not what we had anticipated.
Yeah, that's right. Hey,
But certainly, again, it's all about building trust and feeling heard, valued, and respected. And again, I do want to pass along my thanks to the entire team, even those
Very
that are in
much so.
Spain. Work with speaks to the professionalism of the School of Land Use Planning in that program.
you know, you guys, I'm just thinking about this. You did the work for us here. And one of the things that you've got to watch is the city council struggle with this, and the citizens come out largely not in favor. So as you had a chance to do that, that's a valuable experience, just as valuable as probably putting together the material. So we appreciate you hanging in there with us. Yes.
I defended my thesis with all of my original research, mostly polls and questionnaires, being exactly the opposite of what I thought it would be. So, I learned that, people didn't want to put together a template for conflict resolution in the workplace. They wanted to fly by the seat of their pants and handle it case by case. But so, yeah, I had to defend, even though my research sort of disproved my thesis. All right. So back to our agenda. Thanks.
You're welcome to stay if you're so inclined.
Getting controversial stuff.
Yeah. Could end up spending $36,000 on a tree.
Good luck. Oh, yes, and on your next adventure.
All right. So our next agenda item then is a discussion of the holiday tree lighting with Greg.
Thank you very much, Mayor, members of the council, talking about the tree lighting. And why are we talking about the tree lighting? Well, as was brought up during budget time, there is a shift in how the event had been done the past couple of years. So we've been holding this event since 2010, when it was first held at the town center in partnership with West Columbia Gorge Chamber of Commerce. From there, we actually brought it to our former city hall, where we lit an 80-foot fir tree and had, Santa choir in our tiny cozy city hall, where we packed it to the nines. Starting in 2018, we had to move the event. City Hall site was under construction. Our Christmas tree was cut down. Luckily, the town center acquired new ownership group, and they were very willing and wanting to hold, a holiday event and have some of that spirit there. So they supplied a 26-foot artificial tree pre-lit. And so again, we brought in, Santa, other holiday characters to acquire the refreshments. This past year, the town center owners, they say they can no longer support that. Not sure exactly why, if it was because of just financial constraints, the vendor they're using is no longer doing it. We don't know exactly why they're not doing it at the same level they did, but it provides an opportunity, especially now we're in our new home, our permanent home, an opportunity. Is this a town center event? Is this a city hall civic center event? So this is what is known, and that's the event the Saturday following the Thanksgiving holiday weekend. About 5 to 7 p.m. We'll have the holiday refreshments, the cider, the hot chocolate. Last year we introduced Chumperado. That was really well received and delicious. Again, with the holiday cookies, candy canes, holiday characters, whether it be, Santa, we have a polar bear, those kind of things. The Grinch was there last year. But it's really the location is what we're here to talk about, because that drives a couple of factors. So as we discussed briefly at budget time, we did include money in the budget to acquire a large artificial tree, $33,000, which anywhere from a 26 to 32-ish foot artificial tree could be acquired at that. I chose this picture because it kind of shows what's involved in setting one of these up. It's a metal framework that's in panels. Those are bolted together, anchored at the bottom. And then you have the lights and tree are attached to it. And you can see, bucket truck, boom lift, people climbing the skeleton. That's what's involved in the big tree. And whether the big tree's here in our plaza or here in the town center, those elements remain the same. There's a couple more considerations at the town center, including, some setup logistics, liability that don't necessarily exist here, but the same things of setup and storage exist regardless.
When you talk about liability, like they'll cover insurance versus here, or?
Yeah, like if we have it here and let's just say a child climbs in it and falls off of it, it falls over, the liability is very, very clear because we own the tree, we own the space. If we're at the town center and we own and set up the tree and something happens, whether because of a natural event or human caused event, where does that fall? Was there adequate security? Did someone mess with it? Because it's not on our property. That's a little bit of a gray area. Likely we would regardless, we'd own some liability, but to what extent, what caused what incident? For example, we'd be plugging into their outlets. Maybe it shorted out and electrocuted something. Who owns that? At the budget hearing, there was talk of, we have this great city hall and civic center. We're trying to bring things back here and create that sense of space. So instead of a large tree, so again, large tree is always on the table, whether it's here or town center, and that's something for you to discuss here shortly. There's an option B of holding the event here, but without a large tree and using some of those funds to purchase, light pole decor and decorations that hang off it, and some photos in the next slide of that. Adding lighting to the building. There's some really great technology with projections now. We heard from the mayor at the budget time, it'd be great to light a big tree again. That was very stressful and costly, spending thousands of dollars on trees that weren't necessarily built like a Christmas tree to support the lights in our east wind. There are great projection technologies that can make the trees look lit. And because we installed a lot of outlets, could be pretty strategically placed and, installed and give the illusion that the trees are lit. And then utilize the photo here of the 12-foot tree that we purchased for the lobby and the decorations we already have for the event. So here again, just some imagery of light pole decorations, the one on the upper right, that's the projection technology, and actually both, and on the bottom left is actually another projection technology. So whether we use that, light the building, project the trees, these are just some examples of what is possible, especially with the funding allocated this coming year. So looking for your help in serving that direction. And so if the town center, set up storage liability, if at City Hall, we don't necessarily need the large tree, there are other options and considerations. If we still have the large tree, there's still storage and setup concerns that we'll have to address. And if that's what you direct, you say, we want a big tree as big as we can afford, we will resolve the storage and setup concerns, however that looks. And if you say, you know what, bring it back here, no large tree, are there some decorations you want to prioritize over others? So that's how the discussion's been formed, and just it's now for yours to direct me.
Vice President Nissen.
Bring it here and light it up. I like the idea of not going with the big tree, so the biggest thing for me is storage. We're gonna have for 20 days a year, we're gonna have this that's available and is great. But then for the other 345 days, it's going to take up a lot of real estate in our limited footprint, whether it's here or at Ops. And we're gonna lose that real estate. Whereas if with some of these pictures on the previous slide, we can get some projectors that are not just light up one tree, we might be able to light up multiple trees. The only thing I want to see is a monstrous star so everyone in Camas can look across the river and know exactly where we are.
City Hall is, yeah.
Point, how we used to light up the fir tree, the star on that was independently lit. That did actually exceptionally well because it was independently lit. So that's something we can look at doing.
If we put the star on the top of the tree, perfect. But yeah, I'm all in favor of lighting the building and decorating. We've got the great space. We might as well keep it here. And by keeping it, not having the big tree, not having some of the other decorations, we do reduce that liability of vandalism and damage from the wind and a kiddo climbing and falling off.
Well, you guys already convinced me that we need to bring it back here, one of those meetings. And I'm in agreement not to take on the big tree for all the reasons here that we know. Yeah, you just think of the wind and the damage and just all that. So I think we can do the job without the big tree, put the tree in here. So I'm all supportive of moving forward with it.
I'm in favor of bringing it here, but I think it's called a tree lighting for a reason. Everyone's expecting to light the tradition of what that provides, I think is important. Do I think we need the same type of tree or as big as the one at the town center? I don't think so. The city of Fairview has this like hole in the middle that is covered each year, but when they do the tree lighting, they uncover it, and that's where the tree place, and I think it's a real tree, and I know that can be costly over time, but I think there's still some value in putting up a tree outdoors. People being the only park in our city is being so heavily used now in the wintertime, I can see it also being that people coming and taking pictures if they weren't able to make it that evening, just still having that as a feature here. I think still brings some value to it. So I would see if we could do something outdoors and still have some decorations, if possible.
Could you, maybe it's lighting by turning on
The stuff.
projector and all the lights. And it becomes part of that. That's a lighting ceremony.
Yeah, and maybe that's when we could pull the trigger on the star, if we put the star on top of something.
As well as have a tree.
Light the star and turn on the projectors for the first time at the lighting, and then leave them going throughout the.
That does reduce the photo opportunity. If maybe we coincide the 12-foot tree that's inside here, and this space is open as well during the ceremony.
Oh, yeah, be
Or during
envisioned.
during the
you know,
festivity, to give that photo op for those people that are looking for it.
I'm just thinking also outside operation hours, that we're not gonna hold the door open, and it just, and as someone with kids, during that time, we go around because it is raining, so there isn't so much, there's only so
No,
much
you take
can
that
do.
back.
So we do go looking around, like, where are some lights that we can just be in the car and sit, and so obviously we do hit all the local ones here. So I think there is some, I look at it through that lens, as a family opportunity. And so, could we look at something, again, it doesn't have to be a huge tree, but could we look for something similar, but keep it still outdoors?
I can say, the cost of the tree seems to be exponential. That the bigger you go, it's not an incremental increase, it's dramatic increase. We could prioritize certain decorations, get that cost, and see what's kind of left over in the bucket. Maybe it's a 14-footer, which tends to be a bit more reasonable. I mean, again, we bought a 12-foot here, not necessarily meant for outdoor extreme environment, but maybe there's something based on budget and what other things are costing, the star, projectors, light pole decorations, for that type of opportunity outside of, I'll call it the event day, when you'd have to take your photo through the glass tree.
Councilman.
What happens, so the $33,000 is like allocated for decorations, or what happens if we don't spend? Like, does it go back into the general?
So basically, we did it capital,
Yes.
correct? So let's just say we spend 20 on stuff. The other 13 we could either use as other opportunities come up in that year for event capital. Of course, would bring it to you, for example. Otherwise, it just becomes part of the unappropriated ending fund, or the ending balance that for the next year is the ending fund balance.
The town center tree that they used to have, that, can that?
We believe, and this is me talking with Em, who's talking to the town center folks. So they hired a company to do it. It sounds like the company sold everything and is no
Oh, I
longer
see.
doing it. We've reached out to providers that sell the big trees, like, hey, who can set these up? And they didn't have any names for us, which kind of led to the concern I'm fully confident our crew is more than capable to put together, a tree. It would probably take a couple days. That's their time away from utilities management, other priorities. And again, the storage concern too.
Like, we could do a lot with decoration and a giant tree, like something scaled down, and I love the star idea as well.
Yeah, I'm all for bringing it back here as well. And I like being able to put the star up. That's a great idea. Projectors. Okay, take the $33,000 budget and
Light it up.
buy some cool stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and these aren't the $30 projectors at, you know, the hardware stores. These are hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
We want big ones.
We want big ones.
Good ones. We want good.
Space.
Welcome to city council. It's events.
That's right.
Get some, you know, do some laser Floyd in the plaza.
I would be for that if we did a Prince one too.
Yeah, we're having night out at the park or whatever and might as well do something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For the direction, we'll go ahead and come July, we'll work before July, when that's 2 weeks away. Start getting a list together of some whiz bang things and get someone to procure a new giant star.
Yeah, if we get too many lights going, we'll have to notify PDX.
Okay.
So we get, we don't have, air traffic
Just a
control.
little red flashing light at the tip of the star.
Put some around the park.
All right. So we'll stick with Greg then for our next agenda item. And this is a discussion on update for 238.
You're sticking with me for the whole agenda, whether you like it or not.
We love it.
All right, so this is an update on, I call it impacts from the 238th reconstruction project. It was briefly mentioned a couple council meetings ago that the county had cost overruns that they wanted to pass along. And, you know, we kind of said time out, and there's some back and forth. And this is bringing that back to you at a staff level, what was negotiated, and getting your feedback and sign off on the approach. So background on 238th, it was part of the 2012 multi-city, multi-jurisdiction metro connections plan, where they're looking at to facilitate specifically freight traffic between 84 and 26 in terms of economic mobility. 238th was highlighted because of its freight restrictions due to the lane width, that it couldn't be a freight route, that trucks were prohibited. And that was a problem amongst the four main corridors, 181st, 207/223rd, 257th, and then 238th. So that was included in the overall East Metro Connections Plan with a whole series of other improvements. And in 2017, the county actually started its process, shocking us to us all, about reconstructing that roadway with design work in earnest in 2019. So in 2019, we worked with the county officials to identify and locate our facilities that are under 238th, primarily 2 water mains and a storm facility. With having, you know, we had a permit to have our facilities there, and most of the right-of-way permits pretty much say, if you have to move them because of us, you're on the hook for removing, relocating, or otherwise. Based on preliminary kind of talks with the county, it didn't seem like we would need to do a lot of adjustments to our utilities. And so we actually owned 2 parcels on 238th that were needed to expand the roadway. And then in 2019, the council passed a resolution basically granting those 2 parcels to the county in exchange for whatever conflicts you come across, you're going to handle them because A, you're designing the roadway and you'll know how best to kind of, you know, adjust them and just do it on the fly with our input. The value at the time was about $31,000 of those 2 parcels. They were not buildable. They were hangovers from very, very old utility sites from back in the 40s and 50s. So again, no actual utility, no buildable ability. Unfortunately, once the project was underway, as can happen, even with the best due diligence, a lot of conflicts with utilities, both ours and private utilities, such as, you know, communications and electric. So originally, we did a bunch of locates and everything else with primarily our 2 water lines. And it was thought because of the projected depth, they wouldn't be interfered with the wall, or if they did, they could sleeve it through the wall itself. Unfortunately, despite best efforts to find them beforehand, which is akin to not quite a needle in a haystack, but you take a 6x6 square about 28 feet deep and put a metal straw somewhere about 18 to 24 feet deep in that haystack. That's what we were looking for. So you knew generally where it was and generally how deep, but you didn't know precisely exactly where it was. It turns out once the roadway was open, it was in the most critical spot of their foundation wall. And their engineers were uncomfortable with sleeving through that. That's basically creating a little conduit through the foundation, pop the lines through that we thought we could do if it hit the wall itself or, you know, under the wall wouldn't be an issue. So, you know, clearly, we're good partners. We worked with the county in trying to find design alternatives, given that there are two water mains. One exclusively feeds Cottonwood development, so that's their only water supply. The other one feeds the entire lower village as the primary line. We do have a loop system, so there's redundancies, but that's the primary. So as we work through iterations and those constraints, you know, shipping issues, supply chain problems, we said you can, you know, fine, we can relocate, we can do this, that, but it has to be a hot tap. That's basically where you add your connection to a live line. And these were very, I think there was an 8 and 12-inch line. It's very costly and they couldn't actually get the, so said, okay, well then if it has to be a shut off, you got to do it on our terms. Cotton was, you know, it's got to be done during certain hours. We'll have minimal impact to the residents there. And it was summertime, so it's got to be bottled water for drinking, etc. We actually then, we didn't know if it would work. We shut off that main line that fed the lower system, and our system, its redundancies did work. It did supply the adequate pressure to the rest of the system. But understanding, you know, daytime hours, you know, any kind of incident, high use, it could drop that pressure for a lot of people. So we said it has to be done, you know, early morning hours when the system's pretty much not being used. So those were the conditions. And the county went ahead and, you know, got things together and they did it. There were a lot of downstream impacts to that. For, you know, critical phases of the construction, completing the wall, sidewalk portions, paving, we weren't the only cause of those. And so when the county said, hey, look, this is costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars, we kind of said, your numbers, you know, may be a little squishy. But we knew there were impacts above what was originally thought. And in the spirit of retaining positive partnerships, we actually worked with Commissioner Stegman and her team to bring the roads department, us together to say, look, we know there are impacts. We don't need to necessarily nickel dime what everything is, what is going to be best overall for the jurisdictions and the community. So that's where we came up with some solutions. And is based off of a current project initiative, which is the city paying for the design and construction of pedestrian activated crosswalks on Halsey. The county said, you know what, you are putting in hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment into those safety enhancements that meet larger goals, you know, for the county as well as us. They said, can you make it 6 over the course of the next few years? So 4 of them on Halsey, 2 of them on Wood Village Boulevard, which have been shown to be spots that would be very positive for those enhanced pedestrian facilities. They then also added in updating the ADA curb ramps to current standards. That's something the county's having to do county-wide, and you've probably seen a lot of projects, mostly in the Gresham area, rebuilding those for ADA accessibility. They said, could you do 4 of those? We said, sure. At a staff level, with the understanding we have to take this to council and make sure that there's a sign off and agreement here. And the county provided us a little map of ADA ramps, critical ones, and, you know, 238th, not the byway one, because they redid that as part of the byway, but the other 3. And then we thought, you know, the Birch ones, but that way you have a full connection from kind of neighborhoods or, you know, the main intersection all the way to the park / City Hall and Civic Center. So that's kind of what we crafted with the county. It would probably formalize not so much in an IGA, but a memorandum of understanding, kind of just agency to agency. You know, we don't know what this will cost. Per se, we have some engineering estimates and things of that nature. We're going to be able to bid the first 3 crosswalks on Halsey in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks. We're told we'll get the 100% plans tomorrow. We're very excited. We'll get, you know, a chance to do a final review. They'll stamp them and then we can send it out to bid. We're hoping for more like an October construction timeframe, kind of tag along to maybe an existing project in the region. And this can be an add-on, get it done in about a month and a half. And we'll know what that value is. With the remaining work to be done in the next several upcoming fiscal years, and even in the language that we're kind of working with the county, it's very squishy in adding, you know, depending on resource availability. So there's give and take there. We can get grants. So if we get grant funding for all of it, county doesn't care. It doesn't have to be necessarily city funds or urban renewal funds. It could be any available funding. I've been working with Councilor Minor, who's on that ODOT Small Cities grant program, to make sure that we remain eligible, because at the moment, That's a little questionable because of some tweaks that were made from the ODOT level that we may have to advocate to reverse. That aside, we'll work for grants, urban renewal funding. So all the projects would actually be in the urban renewal area and urban renewal eligible.
How with those crosswalks on Halsey, could that be put into the existing TGM grant?
The one that's on the main streets on Halsey.
Yeah.
No, so that one, they would be in it insofar as, general bubbles for placement, which already exists in a county pedestrian transportation plan. That's how we knew the locations. These designs are they're location specific. So you can't necessarily say, okay, we can design the one and then, plunk it because it's all about the grades of the sidewalk, the street, all sorts of things go into the design, and the TGM grant's not going to be anywhere near that level where they're designing specific facilities, but rather the general template or bubble, if you were. But it would be incorporated into that, holistic project of, yes, here are either the built or will be built crossings.
And so the 4 on Halsey, those are already pre-identified spots through efforts that the county has done previously.
Yeah, we worked with the county in the original Main Streets on Halsey development plan to kind of plunk, again, bubble them in. And that's where we were going to have 4 this round. But we're only getting 3 because the 4th one, the one furthest to the west, there's a lot of difficulty there and not a lot of right of way. And what we'll probably have to do is push it a little further west than we thought, so that the north end of it would actually be in Fairview. That little green space next to Oaks and Woods before, if you're driving west, there's a green space, then you get to the Oaks and Woods. It'd probably land in that green space is for the north end of it. So just outside of our boundary, because the thought is Home 4 would be very willing to give us, or the county, the right of way needed to facilitate a pedestrian activated crosswalk because it'd benefit their residents, community members as well.
Well, and it really would have been, really would have been cool to link the hotel in Wood Village Burrito.
That one we got.
That one we got.
So the
But,
3 locations, one kind of just outside City Hall near the bus stops, because those are pretty active bus stops. The other just west of 240th. So kind of where Vista View will be built in the future. The next one is right at Best Western, not quite Wood Village Burrito's front door. It's just about 20 feet west of their front door.
Oh, come on.
And then one to the west, just again.
But that one to the west, what I was going to continue is saying is it'd be good to have a link to the bottle drop. That's closer to the bottle drop.
That's where we wanted it. And there's not the right of way between bottle drop and then kind of essentially the northern city limit. There's no right of way left to put the facilities there because we really wanted it kind of between bottle drop and that other kind of construction office, because you have a couple bus stops there, a lot of pedestrian activity. We thought that'd be a great spot, and the county can't fit it there.
Maybe what we do is talk to Triman and see if they can move. So it just, so that it eases there.
I mean, I think there's still a lot of options for that west end one. We told the county, because they were struggling with it and it was holding up the other 3 that were essentially done. We said, fine, drop that one, finish these. We can pick that one up later.
And then my last question or comment is the ones on Wood Village Boulevard, how is that going to impact, or could we talk with Grand Ron about those
I
constructions?
have
there?
already talked with them about that. Because again, the last thing we want to do is put down, $250,000, $350,000 into a facility that maybe in 3, 5, 10 years gets wiped out because we know that that intersection of Riverwood is going to be signalized. And so we talked with them several months ago when we realized the need for something there. We don't want to put in a bunch of money to have it ripped out. What can we do to partner, both build goodwill and serve the community that facilitates your potential future development and serves the people today? And talking with their engineering team, they said, yeah, there's probably some improvements we could, jointly make together that you can then adapt to a signal. So basically it'd look different than what we're getting for the other ones, but would still serve the purpose in an interim of a pedestrian activated crosswalk that would then be signalized at a potential date pending future potential development. Yeah, because we had the same concern that we didn't want to put in a lot of heavy infrastructure that,
But I mean, again, it is needed now.
yes. And that is the next one after these ones. That's our target area. Not so much, I mean, the western one is too, but we really wanted to focus there on none on Wood Village Boulevard. And certainly with the stats, the past, 6 months we've seen there with those missions, something is needed today or, as soon as possible.
Greg, when all of this back to the water line moving and locating and all that, was that memorialized in the GIS system? Praying that we don't ever have to go down that road again or any of our
I
other roads.
believe
but-
we got some as-built from their engineering team.
Okay,
I mean, to say it didn't change much. It kind of looks like a crazy straw right there now. Not quite ideal, but it works. We had our DRC and others review the plans to make sure, is this like, decent?
I
Not
just-
optimal, but it works.
I know we've been attempting to capture all of that
Yep.
digitally, so we don't have to send somebody into the archives for the next 6 months trying to find.
Yeah,
a set of
pretty
as-built.
much. And it's to say 20 years from now, county needs to do something else. We say, here's the plans. Here it is. Here's what it looks like.
Okay, great, thank you.
Counselor Mann? For Greg? All right. Greg?
Yeah, thank you. So we'll feedback with the county saying, yes, this is good. And we'll start formulating that MOU based on, no, I won't say what I was going to say.
Good work.
Based on other works. It
Good
may be a
work
while
of,
before we get the MOU.
Nice
but
job.
Greg, nice work, though, confronting a problem, working with the county and coming up with a solution that really helps our city too. So,
And I like it even better that we were already headed down that road with the crosswalks
Yeah.
and we were able to
yeah.
And I want to give
incorporate that into
publicly
the.
my thanks to Rebecca Savinford and Commissioner Stegman, who had to play some behind the scenes work to get county roads department to see the big picture that, their office and we see about the positive partnerships and how can we build something together.
Greg mentioned we are stuck with him whether we like it or not. And so that includes our next agenda item, discussion of the 2023 APP.
I mean, I suppose, Becky loves presentations. I guess she's going to kill me. All right, last presentation of the evening. You all, as we discussed several months ago, some, changes personally, staffing wise, that may need to adjust some other, projects, initiatives, priorities that we thought we had a plan for and adjusting those. So again, just recapping, you all adopt your annual performance plan April time prior to the budget. And it's all based off, the council retreat, which is in February or March time. It's crafted, refined, and then put out there. Since that time, though, as you've been aware with my personal situation with my wife, that drew some time away. Treatment plan changed from what we thought it was going to be. That actually allows me to be here more than I thought I was going to be. But there's still, we had M leave. We know there's some things on council that, committees and things that changed. And we do know, at least for kind of the summer period through kind of early fall, things will need to push a little bit just based on capacity. And that's the kind of the window that these things are framed in, is kind of call it, now through October-ish. And I really wanted to focus on the items that will be delayed because of that. And that's really that community research and engagement effort, that really robust piece, pushing that back till probably more that fall, early winter time, as we can maybe get some new staff on board. I'll talk about that in a minute. We need to, it'd be good to put a pause on the 238th facade restart, again, just because of staffing capacity and that general overhaul of the LMGM and CI zones. We do have the quick fix in process that you authorized a couple of months ago. We're taking that to Planning Commission and Council in July. So the quick fix, bringing back warehousing and freight and adjusting the commercial use, that is being completed and will be completed. But that big comprehensive look, push that back probably. Again, no one industry or property owner is driving that. That was more, that's the last piece of our zoning and development code that we haven't touched. And it'd be good to actually holistically look at that. But that can be, whether it's done starting, next month, 6 or 8 months, not much is going to change with that. So those are the biggest items that will probably be delayed or need to be delayed. I just want to reassure all of you, though, that our day-to-day operations and our services community will not change. And that's, our utility management, building and planning permits and services, our general maintenance, whether it's to parks, facilities, streets, and that's general guest services and helping guests and residents as they come into the building for help. We will always be there to serve them, 8 AM to 4:30 PM Monday through Friday, and a little bit of a pause right now with our website, social media stuff, but we're building that back up, and it should be that standard over the next couple weeks again, as we've shifted some things. Current APP items will be completed, as noted in the past report, as well as any projects or initiatives already underway or essentially required to complete, which the whole list was in your packet, whether it's the scholarship program, elections, all those types of things. That train is moving, and we're going to make sure it continues to move. This list is not necessarily to say something has to shift or move. It's more of just here are the regional meetings that we're involved with. That's Play East, the joint offices with the homeless and houseless forum. So everyone knows, I do meet along with the other 3 city managers with the executive team from the joint office and Multnomah County every month. And that's been in the weekly updates, and we're meeting with the new executive director tomorrow. Trying to be forward focused. There's been a lot of frustrations of lack of services over the past many years, let alone this past year. And we're really trying to set what is the standard moving forward and what those investments could be or need to be, and how can be supportive partners in that. We got, a muck tuck, and Councilor Minor serves on that. And we've got the big acronym for the flood district, and they'll be at your meeting in July. We do know we have our legislative session coming up, and that is an important one. It's the big session, so we still want to be supportive. And, the league, you'll see next month, the league has their priorities out, so you get to vote on those, as well as our own initiatives and efforts through Representative Hudson and Senator Gorsuch, who will also be at, I think, your next meeting. The DLCD CFEC, that's the Department of Land Conservation Development, climate friendly equitable communities work that they've been pushing through, that makes House Bill 2001 look very simple and easy. And so we with the area cities, and actually Metro and the Metro area cities, have been very involved in that and shaping it, because some of the things that are coming out of that aren't practical given the environment in which we live in. The Main Streets on Halsey and its TGM work, we are taking a summer holiday for the Main Streets on Halsey work, as ODOT's still working through its TGM approval. And that's the contract approval. They approved the grant. This is the actual contract with the contractors to do the work. So the group's taking a summer holiday anyway, which is great for the workload. And I was the alternate to MTAC, and that's the Metro Transportation Advisory Committee. Chris Damgan was the primary. He, as you may have heard, is leaving to a private firm. So I get to be the new primary. But they meet monthly, and they're online meetings that should be able to fold in. But those are the regional meetings I want to bring up to you of things we are involved with and want to continue to be involved with. And just I want to point out and touch on, introduce a topic, could be one we'd bring back probably end of July, about a staff reorganization. So we've already had that talk about adding a new staff person. And then we had, M leave and couldn't find the right fit of candidate to fill that. So we took it as an opportunity as a management team to look at holistically the organization and those buckets of duties, tasks, where we can maybe elevate some positions and people to better utilize their skill sets. Because there's not a lot of opportunities in a small organization to really do that. So when you get an opportunity, you want to try to evaluate and do that. So we have a couple of positions we think we can do that for. Basically gut M's position and redistribute some of those tasks. So I'll be creating a new position for finance, handling some finance duties and things, and which also helps with internal controls and separation of duties. We would create another new position that focus on community outreach and engagement initiatives, such as, the events, the website, social media, but also code compliance, because that can be viewed as actually a community engagement piece. Instead of more of like an enforcement side, you look at it as an engagement, you get a different kind of person, different attitude responding to those, but having a that's part of their, half their duties is being out in the community, making sure, building that trust. So that's what we're putting those pieces together now, having those internal conversations to make sure people want to step up and take on some additional or different duties. And then, then recruiting for those open positions. Like I said, we'll talk more about that next month, but that's to address the capacity concerns. That's what's floating around. And probably we'll bring this back again in October. Certainly you'll get the APP updates every month. But again, where are we at with those ones we had to push? Where could those maybe now, fall and readjust after on or around October time. So that was just a real quick as talking with staff capabilities, schedulings, where we think we can land with our abilities to continue to serve the city, and certainly welcome thoughts, questions, concerns.
You and staff feel that you can still continue being down the one body of without having M here to handle all of the day-to-day stuff and whatever other APP items that were not the major ones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean, we've had a lot of people, I just want to thank Becky, publicly for stepping up.
Thanks, Becky.
She's taken, time out of what should have been her personal time to help us out. And that's, that's indicative of the team we have. And, I don't think we're overstretching, to the point of burnout. I think the next month will be, we'll have to push some things, and hopefully the idea of creating some kind of entry level positions or more introductory will get a stronger candidate pool that will be quicker to fill and then easier to train up for. When you're trying to fill a position like M's, the buckets of duties were they're a wide variety, and that turned off some people. Some, they're policy focused, or they're, boots on the ground focused. It was a very much a lot of different buckets. And then, if you were to get someone, call it green or fresh out of school, there's a lot of internal training and bringing up to speed you have to do. We didn't feel we actually had that capacity at that level of position. And we thought long-term that would always continue. So what could make sense in restructuring some things that you could bring on someone a bit green, fresh out of school, or a program, or from the community, and bring up those skills. If they have the right attitude and mindset and customer service abilities, we can train for a lot of things that we're looking for bringing forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Greg.
No questions here other than, sometimes you lay out a plan and it needs a little adjustment. So if it needs some adjustment, don't be caught, come back and let us know. But I appreciate you thinking about it and bringing the staff together. And I trust the staff, yours and the staff's judgment about what you can do.
Yeah, no real comment. I mean, concerns, and you'll share more next month, but hope possibility of hopefully an ability of bringing a few additional staff.
Yeah, we'd be
Possible.
hiring essentially two new people. One, utility billing clerk. That's about as green as you can get in our organization. So there's a lot of opportunities for area community members looking to work for local government, serve their community. The other one is that community outreach focused person. So again, a lot of opportunities if they have the right base skill sets.
All right. No, I think Councilor Minor was correct, when he said, come back to us at any time. I mean, I think we cooked that into the program at the beginning when we talked about how things that the APP might not just be 1-year projects anymore, that they might have a little bit longer horizon, whether it be 2 years or 3. So I think there's already some grace there if you need to make other moves.
And that's really appreciative. I mean, I was here when the APP was first developed, and it was used more of a punishment tool, not necessarily a aspirational build up the community tool. And I just really appreciate the mindset that this isn't punitive. Yes, you need to be held accountable, and it's to elevate the community. And if that takes a little bit longer, but it's done better, that's what it takes. And I also appreciate the grace you've given me, as while my wife has a treatment plan now, and we kind of know-ish where that road is headed. It will change in the future, and I don't know what that'll look like. But I also appreciate all the thoughts and well wishes too.
I had one other comment,
Absolutely.
just tacking on to what Counselor Rios Campos mentioned, and maybe not this year, but maybe we look at one of our high schoolers that's graduating, give them the opportunity for a summer internship. And we get an extra body in here to help out staff during the summer, and gives one of our high schoolers some great work experience.
Job Corps has a office administrative trade as well. And And they become, certified Microsoft expert on all of the Office suite. So we might be able to do a work-based learning as well.
Yeah, and there's certainly sometimes once we sort out or reorg, get people on board and trained up, I think, certainly there are seasons where certainly like finance, if we get someone that can cover the front office and learn those skills while we have some of our other, busy times, could really be synergistic at some point in the future.
Just because right now there's not, I think it's because of the pandemic, not the same response as year past with summer works and what we do with the church, but that could be an avenue as well to, just looking at that where Play East or the church who's operating as a work site currently, even for this year, if there is an individual identified, could be shifted into something where you guys could use in an appropriate manner as well.
And that's certainly our plan for recruitment on these positions is both, we'll call it, the traditional recruitment boards and whatnot, but also using the community resources to say, hey, we have this position open, and see what that interest is from, whether they're from Wood Village or Fairview or whatnot, but the local people. It's not often we get opportunities because we do have generally pretty good retention, and that's a good thing. And when there are opportunities, we want to expand the opportunity.
And I just wanted to comment that you guys know that Karen has been filling in for Lindsay since she's been on maternity leave. Lindsay is starting to come back, but Karen, who retired a year and a half ago, we talked to her about seeing if she would stay on to help us through the hiring and training portion of doing some of these job duty shifts and also getting someone new in. We asked if she would stay until August or September, and she was willing to continue coming in 2 or 3 days a week. So to help with the transition of doing that. And
yeah, we encouraged her to buy a new car, which she did. So now she has to pay for it. Yeah. Got John, he bought a new boat, so he's on the hook for a few more years. Exactly.
We trap them. So that's everything for our agenda. I just wanted to take a minute to remind everyone that the 27th of this month is my last MHCRC meeting. And we will need somebody from the city to fill that role. So if you have anybody that you think might be interested, then we should get them before council spot.
And there's also flyers for the Natural Leaders Appreciation Barbecue this Saturday. That I sent that email. I think we can change to go, but again, reminder that it is this Saturday, 3 o'clock. And Steve Marash donated the meat for it.
Oh, and thanks to Steve, and we are adjourned. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks,
Good night,
Jeff.
everybody.
Good night, Jeff.
I really appreciate how you put me to work tonight.
Your input got us over that tough legal question we had, so.
Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it.